Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. It was meant to be the beautiful start of my honeymoon, the first trip as a married couple, filled with love, adventure, and excitement, but instead, it turned into something completely unexpected, something I could never have prepared myself for. Just as we were about to leave for the airport, after making sure all our bags were packed and ready to go, my husband did something that left me completely shocked. He took my passport and ripped it into tiny pieces, right in front of me. The self-satisfied smirk on his face made my stomach turn. I was furious, but more than that, I felt betrayed. The truth is, I had never really wanted to go on this honeymoon with him in the first place. The idea of going on a trip alone with him, after everything that had happened in our relationship leading up to the wedding, made me uneasy. My plan was always to take my mother with me instead. The tension between us had been building long before we even got married, and deep down, I had known that things weren't right. But I had ignored my instincts, convincing myself that things would get better after the wedding. The ongoing conflict between my husband and his mother had always been obvious, but it wasn't until today that I fully understood just how deep their unhealthy bond went. I have never heard of anyone else's mother-in-law hijacking their honeymoon, yet here I was, living that exact nightmare. As I watched my husband grab a pair of scissors and continue to cut up what remained of my passport, I felt sick. His mother, standing right beside him, grinned with triumph, as if she had won some kind of twisted battle. It was at that moment that I knew, I needed to get away from these people as soon as possible. If nothing else, this cruel act had given me the proof I needed to see them for who they really were. My name is Emma, and I am 31 years old. I have been working for 6 years, and I was overjoyed when, after 3 years of dating, my boyfriend proposed to me. It felt like everything was falling into place. We met at work, where he was a senior employee, and I was just starting my career. He had always been kind, always willing to help when I was struggling with something new. He made me feel special. My past relationship in college had ended because I was too reserved, too quiet. After that, I didn't date for years, and I never thought I would be one of the first among my colleagues to get married. From the very beginning, my husband seemed dependable, reliable, and trustworthy. I was thrilled when he asked me out. I still have the small dolphin figurine we bought together on our first date at the aquarium. His intentions were clear. He wasn't dating just for fun. He wanted to get married. That certainty made me feel safe. After countless dates and happy moments, he proposed to me in the same aquarium where we had first gone out together. That night, I was so happy that I couldn't sleep, but looking back, I wish I had paid more attention to the warning signs, because they had been there all along. Shortly after our engagement, I visited his parents' home. His father was kind and welcoming, but his mother, she made it clear from the very start that she did not approve of me. I still remember the way she scoffed and said, "He could have done so much better than this plain girl." Her words stung, and for the first time, I felt doubt creeping into my mind. Was I really making the right choice? But I told myself that all brides feel nervous before their wedding, so I pushed those feelings aside. The first real argument we had about our future happened, and my husband and his mother simply assumed I would quit my job after marriage. I had always considered leaving work to focus on my family one day, but I had never made up my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that my job was important to me. It gave me independence, stability, and a sense of confidence that I wasn't willing to give up. My mother-in-law didn't care. She pressured me over and over again to quit, and each time, I firmly refused. As we planned the wedding, things got even worse. My husband and I originally wanted something small and intimate, but as soon as he mentioned it to his mother, she took over. "Mason's wedding has to be grand," she said, her voice firm over the phone. "We can't have a small, meaningless gathering." She dictated every aspect of the wedding, the guest list, the venue, the decorations, even the food. At first, my husband's family agreed to pay for half of the expenses, but later, they went back on their word, leaving me to cover most of the costs. Every time I tried to make a budget-friendly choice, she would criticize me, calling my decisions cheap and unsuitable. I kept telling myself that after the wedding, she would have no control over my life, but I was wrong. The biggest shock came right after the wedding. Without telling me, my husband canceled the lease on the apartment we had chosen together and moved all my belongings to his family's home. "We're going to live with my mother," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I was speechless. I had made it so clear that I wanted space from her, but he had ignored me completely. Despite everything, I still held on to the hope that our honeymoon would be a fresh start. a chance to reconnect. I had planned the whole thing myself, paying for all the expenses, while Mason insisted on handling the final bookings. I assumed he had planned something romantic, something that would make all the stress worth it, but the night before we were set to leave, he casually dropped a bombshell that shattered everything. "Emma, I'm going with my mom." I thought he was joking. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. "This is our honeymoon, Mason. We've only paid for 2 tickets and 1 hotel room." He shrugged. "I never said I was going with you. This trip is for my mom, as a thank you for everything she's done for me. You can stay home and get the house ready. Make sure you clean everything." And then, without hesitation, he took my passport and ripped it apart. I watched in horror as he destroyed it. Just then, his mother walked in, fully dressed and ready to go. "Mason, are we leaving now?" she asked. His face lit up with excitement. "Yeah, finally, we can take this trip without any interruptions." They both laughed, completely ignoring the fact that they had just humiliated me. In that moment, I knew I had married the wrong person. I had tried so hard to make things work, to keep the peace, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. For a brief moment, I was in shock, unable to move, unable to think, but then, I realized that I had only one option left. I was not going to spend the rest of my life trapped in this nightmare. That night, I made my decision. I was filing for divorce. I wanted to erase any trace that I had ever lived in that house. As I cleaned the living room, my hands trembled when I stumbled upon something shocking, proof that my husband had been stealing money from his company. He worked in sales and was secretly taking some of the earnings by underreporting them. Even more disturbingly, his mother was in on it. She had written everything down in a detailed notebook, real sales numbers, the amount he had pocketed, and even a list of the luxury gifts he had bought for her with the stolen money. I was stunned that they had left such important evidence out in the open. For a brief moment, I wondered if working at the same company would allow me to smooth things over, to protect him somehow. But then I asked myself, why should I cover for a man who had been so cruel to me, a man who took his mother on our honeymoon while leaving me behind? With the evidence in hand, I went straight to our company. My colleagues were confused when they saw me. They knew that both my husband and I had taken time off for our honeymoon, so my sudden appearance left them in shock. When they asked why I wasn't on my trip, I no longer felt the need to hide the truth. I told them everything, how my husband and his mother had gone without me, how my passport had been destroyed to prevent me from going, and how I had paid for the entire trip out of my own pocket. Their reactions were a mix of disbelief and outrage. Some looked at me with sympathy, while others whispered amongst themselves, shaking their heads in disgust. I appreciated their concern, but I had more important things to do. I needed to speak to someone who could truly help me, someone with power in the company. What my husband and his mother didn't know was that one of the top executives in the company was my uncle. I had kept this a secret from everyone, including my husband, because I wanted to succeed on my own merits. When I applied for the job, I made sure not to use my family connections, and I had asked my uncle to keep our relationship confidential. He respected my wishes, and aside from a few friendly smiles during my orientation, we never interacted at work. But now, I needed him. I went straight to his office, explaining the situation to his secretary. The moment my uncle saw me, his usual warm smile faded. Concern filled his eyes as he asked, "Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon?" I couldn't hold back my emotions anymore. Tears spilled down my face as I told him everything, how my husband had abandoned me, how his mother had taken my place, and how I had discovered the embezzlement. When I handed him the evidence, I saw a side of my uncle I had never seen before. His usual calm expression turned into one of pure anger. Without hesitation, he promised to call an emergency board meeting. After our heavy conversation, he suggested we get lunch together to help me feel a little better. Despite the heartbreak and betrayal I had suffered, it was comforting to know that there were still people in my life who genuinely cared about me. A week later, my husband and his mother returned from their vacation. He called me the moment he landed, furious that I hadn't come to pick them up from the airport. He also complained that the house wasn't cleaned as he had demanded. When he angrily asked where I had been, I cut him off before he could finish. "You two sure are loud and annoying," I said, my voice steady. "I don't want to hear your voice anymore. Why would I pick up someone I'm divorcing, and why would I follow your ridiculous orders?" He scoffed, clearly not taking me seriously. "Do you think it's okay to talk to me like that? I did you a favor by marrying you. If I divorce you, No one else will ever want you. My mom is furious too. If you come back now and cook for us, I might forgive you. We're sick of eating foreign food." His words were cruel, but they only made me more confident in my decision. I no longer had any doubts. This man never truly cared about me. He saw me as nothing more than an obedient servant. Calmly, I told him, "I've already hired a lawyer for our divorce. If you have anything to say, direct it to them." There was a brief silence before he exploded in anger. "What are you talking about? I'm not getting a divorce." I could hear his mother in the background, yelling and insulting me, but I had the final word. "By the way, I've already informed the company about your embezzlement. They'll be calling you in soon. You might want to get yourself a lawyer too." I hung up. I could almost feel his panic through the phone. He kept trying to call me back, but I blocked his number. I had wasted enough of my life on him. Behind the scenes, my uncle had already taken action. Since he knew about my supposed honeymoon dates, he quickly moved forward with an internal investigation. Using the evidence I provided, the company summoned my husband and reviewed the financial records. It turned out that he had embezzled a significant amount of money. During a tense meeting with the company's executives, my husband tried to lie his way out of trouble, even going so far as to accuse me of being the real embezzler. My uncle, unable to hold back his fury, slammed his hand on the table and defended me. "My niece would never do such a thing. We've already confirmed that you and your mother are responsible. You're lucky we haven't called the police yet." At that moment, my husband's arrogance crumbled. He finally realized that he had lost everything. A few days later, I went to the office to return the wedding gifts my colleagues had given us. Since my marriage had fallen apart so quickly, I thought it would be best to give them back, but no one would accept them. They told me the gifts were meant as blessings for me, and that I deserved happiness, regardless of what had happened. As I stood there, surrounded by kindness, my soon-to-be ex-husband appeared. His face was pale, his posture desperate. "Why didn't you tell me you were related to the top executives?" "I'm sorry, can we start over? Can you ask your uncle to help me keep my job and make this go away?" His audacity was unbelievable. "Do you even hear yourself?" I asked, disgusted. "Think about your actions and take responsibility for what you've done. There's no going back. We're getting a divorce." He tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. My colleagues quickly stepped in, and security was called to escort him out. That was the last time I saw him as an employee of the company. He was fired on the spot, and legal action was taken against him for the stolen money. Despite everything, I felt lighter. This painful chapter of my life was finally closing. Once everything was settled, I planned to take that long-awaited trip abroad, not as an abandoned wife, but as a free woman ready to start a new life on my own terms.